Between pristine forests and slopes rising above the Aegean Sea, there is a land that remains immobile in the face of the rush of the modern world. There, time seems to have slowed down, not for lack of progress, but for a conscious decision to preserve what is essential. This place does not reveal itself to the curious, nor does it offer itself as a tourist destination. Reaching it requires more than desire. It requires humility. Mount Athos, located on a remote peninsula in northern Greece, is not just a geographic space, but a spiritual sanctuary where the soul finds a silent mirror. Since ancient times, this mountain has been set aside for sacred purposes. Tradition has it that Mary, the mother of Jesus, set foot there and consecrated the soil as her spiritual garden, reserving it exclusively for those who decided to abandon everything in search of a deeper connection with God. What could be seen as exclusion is in fact a symbol of total consecration. Those who enter this territory leave behind not only belongings or routines, but every distraction that stands between the human heart and the divine. No signs of modern life disturb the peace of Mount Athos. Vehicles don't advance, phones don't ring, technology doesn't rule. Noise has no place here. Instead, what one hears is the whisper of the wind in the trees, the birdsong at dawn, and above all, the voices of monks reciting scripture, chanting psalms, and offering prayers that seem to intertwine with the very environment. This sacred ground is traversed by bare feet and resolute hearts. The journey to it isn't easy, but it is precisely this difficulty that filters intentions. Those who arrive here do so with a thirst for eternity. The monks who inhabit Mount Athos live in a way that defies contemporary logic. Their needs are few, their routine is simple, but their inner life is rich and profound. They rise when most are still asleep, between 3 and 4 in the morning, not to begin household chores or respond to urgent demands, but to begin the day in communion with the sacred. They gather in candlelit chapels, where the flickering light seems to dialogue with the silence of dawn. There is no rush, no timetabled timing. There is only surrender to prayer. Every gesture, every chant, every reading is performed with reverence. This is no empty ritual, but an authentic expression of faith that spans generations. The chants are sung in ancient languages, and even those who don't understand the words feel the spiritual impact they provoke. There is a presence that envelops everything, a kind of peace that cannot be explained, but can be perceived. The silence of the place is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something greater, which silences the inner noise and awakens the soul to forgotten realities. The monasteries, built with stones that seem to spring from the mountain itself, are like fortresses erected not only to protect, but to remember. Their walls hold ancient manuscripts, sacred relics, hand-painted, icons, and objects that bear witness to a faith lived to the fullest. But none of this is displayed with vanity. Everything there points to something beyond. Beauty lies in the simplicity and spiritual functionality of each element. The monk's way of life is a return to the essential. They are unattached to comfort or notoriety. They prefer invisibility. Their calloused hands build not to show off, but to serve. Their eyes seek not recognition, but guidance. They live like the early Christians, as described in the book of Acts, sharing bread, persevering in prayer and doctrine, keeping alight a flame that many believed extinguished. Their faith is not theoretical, but practical, built in silent hours, discreet fasts and long nights of vigil. Mount Athos doesn't try to compete with the grand structures of the modern world. It offers no attractions. It invites renunciation, and that's what makes it so powerful. In a time where noise is constant and haste has become a way of life, this place stands as a living reminder that man was created for something beyond the ephemeral. There's a silent war being waged there, not with weapons, but with prayers. The monks fight not against men, but against everything that obscures the truth and feeds the ego. They confront themselves, their own thoughts, desires, and temptations, with a purpose greater than self-satisfaction. Those who come to Mount Athos from other countries or realities are impacted not by what they see, but by what they feel. A kind of reverence envelops them. It's as if, upon crossing the border of that consecrated space, they enter another time, a time where the eternal is more real than the present. Many arrive weary, burdened by guilt or doubt, and there they find a silence that doesn't condemn but heals. It's not an empty silence, but a silence full of answers for those who know how to listen. Visitors rarely speak aloud. The very environment seems to impose a kind of reverence that transcends logic. Men who have spent their entire lives seeking rational explanations for everything find themselves there, disarmed before the mystery. There are no theological debates or eloquent speeches. There is only the silent presence of an intensely lived faith. And in this silence, many hear for the first time the voice of God whispering within their own hearts. Mount Athos, with all its austere simplicity, teaches that the greatest transformation does not occur in the external world, but within the soul that decides to surrender. Monks are not mystical figures far removed from reality, but real men, with stories, pain, doubts, and failures. What makes them different is not the absence of internal conflicts, but the constant decision to face them with prayer, humility, and spiritual discipline. They do not seek to be perfect but faithful, and it is this constant fidelity that shapes the environment around them, transforming rocks into altars, paths into pilgrimages, silence into praise. Meals are eaten in silence, accompanied only by the reading of sacred texts. The food is simple, often without elaborate seasonings, and served with gratitude. Every daily act is a form of worship, a reminder that spirituality is not reserved solely for moments of worship, but can inhabit every detail of daily life. There is no separation between the sacred and the ordinary on Mount Athos. Everything is an offering. And in this way of life, far from excess and distractions, God's presence becomes almost tangible. Even though the number of monks is much smaller than in ancient times, the spiritual strength of Mount Athos has not diminished. On the contrary, it seems that the further the world moves away from the sacred, the more this mountain becomes a sentinel of faith. The monasteries remain steadfast, like towers of spiritual resistance, where men from different countries and cultures unite in a single purpose, to intercede for a world that has often forgotten how to pray. They pray for the sick, the poor, the desperate. They pray for those who have never heard of them, for those who don't believe, for those who mock the faith. And they don't do this expecting recognition. They pray in secret, believing that their silent pleas echo in heaven more powerfully than any public demonstration. They are watchmen of the dawn, guardians of the unseen, fighters facing spiritual battles few are aware of. At a time when so many seek power, control, and influence, the monks of Mount Athos have chosen the path of renunciation, obedience, and stillness. They don't vie for the spotlight. They don't produce content. They don't build personal brands. Their voices aren't heard on stage, but their prayers sustain people they will never see. And this is perhaps the most profound aspect of this reality. The world doesn't see them, but God knows them. The mountain remains there, as it has for centuries, witnessing the passing of empires, wars, and revolutions. While so many structures have crumbled, Mount Athos has endured, not through human strength, but through the constancy of the faith that dwells within. It is not only the rock that holds it firm, but the knees that bend upon it, the hands that rise in supplication, the hearts that break in repentance. In a world where everything is so volatile, this silent fidelity becomes a beacon. The spirituality of Mount Athos is not an escape from reality, but a response to it. While so many rush in search of immediate answers, comfort and distraction, the monks offer another path, the path of listening, of recollection, of full presence before God. It's not about despising the world, but about interceding for it from a deeper place. And this depth is only achieved when one is willing to silence the noise and hear what truly matters. There's something paradoxical about this place. The more hidden it is, the more it reveals. The more silent, the more eloquent. It doesn't seduce, but attracts. It doesn't demand, but invites. And whoever accepts this invitation discovers a kind of richness the world cannot offer, a richness that cannot be measured or sold, because it belongs to another order, the order of the eternal. Monks do not consider themselves superior, nor do they expect to be admired. Many of them shy away from recognition, as if it were a danger, knowing that any glory that does not belong to God is a deviation. They live to serve, to love, to guard the faith with all the fervor of their souls. And perhaps it is precisely this silent surrender, far from the cameras and applause, that sustains the world more than we imagine. In times when faith is often reduced to slogans, events and appearances, Mount Athos preserves something the world seems to have forgotten: sacred awe. Not paralyzing fear, but profound respect, silent reverence for that which is greater than man. There, prayer is not an obligation, but a continuous breath. Fasting is not empty penance, but a gesture of surrender. The routine, however repetitive it may seem to outsiders, is a daily expression of unconditional love for God. The days pass like waves, calm and regular, yet full of meaning. The monks don't live waiting for spectacular miracles. They perceive the miracle in the very act of remaining, of rising every morning to pray, of repeating ancient psalms with renewed devotion. The faith that sustains Mount Athos is not built on fleeting emotions, but on solid rock. The conviction that a moment in God's presence is worth more than a lifetime lived without Him. This simple, almost invisible way of life carries within it an immense power. It's as if each candle lit on the altar reflects an invisible flame that still warms the heart of the church, even thousands of miles away. And when the world forgets to kneel, they remain on their knees. When the world forgets to give thanks, they continue to sing hymns of gratitude. When hope seems to vanish, they keep their vigil, like spiritual sentinels who never sleep. This silent dedication reaches dimensions that defy logic. It is impossible to precisely measure the impact of the prayers offered there, but perhaps it is no coincidence that amidst so much collapse, confusion, and moral crisis, there are still remnants of authentic faith. Perhaps it is this small group, hidden from the world, that still intercedes for him. Men who do not want the stage, who do not want applause, who do not even seek the approval of other men. They live to please God, and that is enough for them. And there's something deeply inspiring about that, because somewhere in our hearts we all feel the need for silence, for refuge, for reconnection with what is eternal. Mount Athos reminds us that this possibility still exists, that there are still places and people who haven't succumbed to haste, superficiality, or spiritual indifference, that it's still possible to live with depth, with purpose, with reverence. Every stone on that mountain holds the memory of men who came before, who also abandoned everything in the name of faith, men who faced persecution, hunger, deprivation, and yet remained. They knew they were there not to live comfortably, but to fight a war few recognize, the war against ego, against vanity, against forgetfulness of God. And this fight continues today, silent and steadfast, in the voices that sing ancestral songs. While the rest of the world sleeps, Mount Athos is more than a place, it's a testimony. A reminder that true faith doesn't need to be defended, it just needs to be lived authentically. It's the opposite of everything the modern world values. Not speed, but patience. Not noise, but listening. not appearance, but essence. And perhaps that's what makes it so necessary today. At a time when many have lost their way, this small, isolated patch of land continues to point in the right direction. And so it remains, motionless, unshakable, shrouded in mist, silence, and eternity. The mountain draws no attention to itself. It does not shout, it does not demand, it does not promote itself, but it speaks to those who can hear. It speaks of fidelity, of surrender, of a life hidden with Christ in God, and perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all, that what the world ignores may, in fact, be what sustains it. We may never set foot on the sacred ground of Mount Athos. We may never hear the chants echoing in the stone chapels, but we can carry their example with us. We can remember that even amidst the noise, it is possible to find inner silence. That, even in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, it is still possible to live with purpose and reverence. And that even far from that mountain, we can still kneel and pray,